Welcome to U.S. Government. Before we get started, let's talk about an intro to taking notes. So notes are to be taken in a notebook. So when I say a notebook, that often refers to a folder with prongs, but it can also be a composition notebook. It could also be a spiral. It could also just be simply a bunch of pieces of paper stapled together. But ideally, we want to take the notes and put them all together in one group, keeping them together in sequential order so we don't get lost. And this will also help whenever it comes time to taking our tests. So whenever you're looking for Unit 1, Section 1's notes, they're all grouped together and everything is in order moving forward. Additionally, whenever taking notes on the slides, you'll notice that the slideshow will have highlights or color coding. Highlights meaning that the background behind the words are in color or the words themselves have been changed color. That is the portion of the slide that students are responsible for taking down what is on the slide. Also, when taking your notes, abbreviations, legends, and symbols are welcome. So like for example, if you don't want to write the word government over and over and over again, and you want to write GOV instead, that's perfectly welcome. When we move on to political parties and you do not want to write Democrat, Republican, or Independent over and over, and you have a system of writing D, R, or I, you're more than welcome to use that. Any way that helps you remember your notes. But in the end, keep in mind, as it says, your notes are simply that, your notes. So if legends, abbreviations, and symbols help you, please utilize that. Conversely, if you're a student that needs to write down everything, please do that as well. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So Unit 1, Foundations of Government. So Unit 1, Section 1 is limited versus unlimited government. So with each one of these videos, we're going to start with a learning target. The learning target is just saying the why to the what. Why are we doing this? What's the purpose? And it also stems from what is called an I can statement. So what we hope to achieve, which is our target, by going through this lesson. So I can compare the essential characteristics of limited versus unlimited governments. Also compare historic and contemporary examples of unlimited governments to examples of limited governments. So we should be able to tell what's the difference between a limited government and an unlimited government, and then also to be able to trace it through history, long ago, and history or current events. So countries that are in existence right now. Okay, to start, let's look at some review terms, such as government, public policies, and constitution. A government is the institution through which society makes and enforces its public policies. What are public policies? Public policies are ideas that a government decides to do, ranging from taxation, defense, education, crime, healthcare, transportation, the environment, civil rights, and working conditions. So basically anything that the government decides to do, the things that are carried out within our society are examples of public policy. So the reason why whenever you go to the grocery store and you buy a $1 item, you can't just slap a dollar down on the counter and walk out. You do have to pay that extra 8 or 9 cents per dollar in taxes. Also transportation or civil rights or keeping our air clean through the environment, working conditions, saying that those of you who are trying to get a job or have a job that your company has that you are wanting to work for or do work for, they have to make sure that you're being paid a minimum wage, and also that they are keeping with standards that will keep you safe while you're working there. Constitution. A constitution is described as the 3 branches that are outlined in this body of fundamental laws, setting out the principles, structures, and processes of government.
Hi, Hi, I'm Craig. I'm not John Green, but I do have patches on my elbows so I seem smart. And this is Crash Course Government and Politics, a new show. Hooray! Why are fireworks legal or illegal? We might find out. Will we find out soon? Anyway, I have a question for you. Have you ever wondered where your tax dollars go, or why people complain about it so much? Or who pays for the highway that runs past your house? Or why you use the textbooks you use in science class? Or why you need a license to drive, or to hunt, or to fish, or to become a barber? I've always wanted to cut my own hair, back when I had it. Have you ever wondered why you have to be 21 years old to drink alcohol, but only 18 to vote, or gamble? Sometimes voting is a gamble. Actually, always. Do you get confused when you hear people on the news talk about Wall Street regulations, or Obamacare, or the national debt? Do you wonder why there are so few cell phone carriers and cable companies? How about why it's okay for student groups to lead prayers in schools, but not for the principal to do so? Have you ever wondered if there are any limits on when, where, and how the police can search your home, or your car, or your locker, or you, or your friend, or your grandma, or your grandma's friend? And do you know why you can stand outside of a government office with a sign and a bullhorn complaining about military action that you think is unfair, and the police can't stop you, but you can be fired from your job for doing the exact same thing? Have you ever been sued or fined? Ever wonder what the difference is between being sued or being fined? Have you ever wondered why our government does the things it does and doesn't do other things? Have you ever wondered what it would be like if we had no government at all? That would be anarchy. Would you like a sex list stand? That's probably illegal. Why is it illegal? And probably most important, have you ever thought about how you can change the things that seem unjust or unfair, or that you just don't like? Okay, so that was more than one question, and obviously there isn't a single answer to all of those questions, except that, in a way, there is. The study of government and politics. And that's what we're going to talk about today, and this whole series, Crash Course Government and Politics. Aptly titled. So let's start by doing what human beings do when confronted with complicated questions they can't answer. We'll answer a simpler one. In this case, what are government and politics? And why do I need to learn about them? Government is a set of rules and institutions people set up so that they can function together as a unified society. Sometimes we call this a state, or a nation, or a country, or Guam. And I'll use these terms somewhat interchangeably, except for Guam. That might be a little confusing. So, we study government in order to become better citizens. Studying government enables us to participate in an informed way. Anyone can participate, but doing so intelligently, that takes a little effort, and that's why we need to learn about how our government works. Politics is a little different. Politics is a term we use to describe how power is distributed in the government. And in the U.S., it basically describes the decisions about who holds office and how individuals and groups make those decisions. Following politics is a lot like following sports in that there's a winner and a loser, and people spend a lot of time predicting who will win and analyzing why the winner won and the loser lost. The outcome of an election might affect your life more than the outcome of a sports game, though, unless you're gambling, which might be illegal. Government is really important. Everyone born in America is automatically a citizen, and many people choose to become citizens every year so that they can have a say in the government. The USA is a republic, which means that we elect representatives to govern us, and a democracy, which means that citizens are allowed to participate. This ability to participate is something we take for granted, but we should. History tells us that citizen participation is the exception rather than the rule. But we're not going to look at history. Who has time? That's what history courses are for with that other guy. So one way people can participate in government is through voting. And many people will tell you that that's pretty much the only way we can participate in government or politics. But they're wrong. And I love pointing out what people are wrong. Let's go to the thought bubble. Sure, when you mark a ballot, you are participating in the political process. But there are so many other things you can do to be an active citizen. You can contact your representatives and tell them what you think about a political issue. People used to do this by writing letters and sending telegrams, but now they tend to call or send emails. Although there's nothing like a good old-fashioned angry letter. People can work for campaigns or raise money or give money. They can display yard signs or bumper stickers. They can canvass likely voters, try to convince them to vote, or even drive them to the polls on election day. You participate in politics when you answer a public opinion poll, or when you write a letter to the editor or comment on an online article. You participate in politics when you blog or tumble, or make a YouTube video or tweet. I guess even YouTube comments count. First, ever been to a march or a rally, or held a sign, or worn a t-shirt with a slogan on it, or discussed an upcoming election at the dinner table and tried to convince your parents who to vote for? You've participated in the political process. And if you've actually run for office, you've participated, even if you didn't win. And if you did win, congratulations! Now get back to work. You should already know this. But probably the most important thing you can do to participate in government and politics is both the easiest and the most challenging. Become more educated. Anyone can be a citizen, but to be a good citizen requires an understanding of how the government works and how we can participate. It requires knowledge and effort, and we have to do it because otherwise we end up being led rather than being leaders. We learn about politics because knowledge is our best defense against unscrupulous people who use our ignorance to get us to do the things that they want rather than what we think should be done. Thanks, Thought Bubble.
To watch more of this video, I do recommend taking a look at the series of crash course videos that are available on YouTube. Moving on to limited versus unlimited. The major differences between the two is they could be unilaterally categorized as dictatorship versus a democracy. A dictatorship is when the government powers are held by a single person, and sometimes it can be a small group of people, but most usually it's a single person. Those in charge are not ruling by the will of the people. So basically, no matter how much the people are upset with the policies that are being put into place, the laws that are being carried out, they do not have a say and they cannot object. So that's what makes it a dictatorship. They can have all of the control. Whereas conversely, under a democracy, when the powers of the government rest with the majority of the people. It is often said that government is one of the oldest human inventions. There was evidence that was shown all the way back in ancient Egypt and the 6th century BC. Greek philosopher Aristotle said that man is by nature a political animal. So I often like to ask the question, what does Aristotle mean by this? That man is by nature a political animal. Now, thinking about this, rudimentally, the idea stems from the fact that, and you may definitely disagree with this straight off the bat when I say this, is that we're political by we are political by nature because we as a society, believe it or not, like to be told what to do. And I'm sure many people that heard that statement right there will say, well, no, I really don't like the government telling me what to do. Well, in some ways you do. You do like the fact that, number one, there are protections and structures that are put in place for your safety. You do like it that the fact that it is totally not okay for someone to break and enter your property and steal your things. That red lights mean stop and green lights mean go. That it's basically just not the purge out there 24/7 and that sort of thing. We as a society do like structures. I always equate it to the idea, and think about this for a moment, just pretend, is that think about a kind of a post-apocalyptic scenario. You could draw this back to any kind of, nuclear fallout or zombie movie, whatever you're most affiliated with. But think about the fact that, well, what if in this moment, as you're listening to this video or watching this video, that you have the government is gone and the people that may be in your school or home or wherever it is that you're listening to, those are the only people that are alive. Whether it's nuclear fallout or everybody outside the four walls of wherever it is that you are, everybody else is zombies. Now, you will say that that's probably a moment of anarchy because there isn't a government, there isn't structure, it's just rudimental, we've got to survive. But once there is that moment of anarchy has dissipated, which is usually short-lived, government always steps in, whether we like to call it government or not, because if you're in a group of, let's say, 10 people, somebody or a group of somebodies within that 10 people, they're going to establish a leadership. Someone is going to come forward with almighty question of, well, what do we do now? How are we going to get food? What are we going to do for shelter? So how government plays out, could either be one of those people in that group of 10 becomes a dictator and starts telling people what to do. You don't have a choice. It could also be democracy, whereas maybe all 10 people are making decisions and voting on who's going to take what types of jobs and how this new micro society, this little mini society, is going to move forward. So just think about that. Now, the video that we just saw for Crash Course, it does talk about the two terms, politics and government. The difference, they are like terms, but I like the fact that understanding that politics is the process, whereas government is the institution. Government is like the Constitution. It's the written words, whereas you see our representatives and senators, they are the ones that are embodying politics. They are the ones drafting the bills. They are the ones arguing over it. They are the ones voting. They are a physical human embodiment of how politics is played out. Okay, limited government. Democracy. So democracy, the supreme political authority rests with the people. The people hold the sovereign power. Sovereign is just a fancy word for independent. Sovereign power, and government is conducted only with the consent of the people. There are two types of democracy: direct democracy or representative democracy. Direct democracy is also pure democracy, where the will of the people is translated into public policy directly by the people themselves, such as we go out and vote. That is direct democracy. Now, typically it works only as far as to use it for a total government. It only works the best on small levels because there are less people. It doesn't exist on a national level pretty much anywhere in the world as of today. What's more popular to be used on a national level is representative democracy, where a small group of people or persons are chosen by the people to act as the representatives to express their popular will. So, for example, us electing senators and those going into the House of Representatives to vote on our behalf. Now, this is used widely on a national, state, and local levels. Other forms of limited government is a constitutional monarchy, a system of government in which a country is ruled by a king and a queen whose power is limited by a constitution. And then a republic, a government in which the supreme power resides in a body of citizens entitled to a vote and is exercised by elected officers and representatives responsible to them and governing according to said law. So just to get a quick glimpse as to what types of governments that are out there, and I like this map because it's color coded and it's just a good idea to get a perspective as to what type of governments are globally seen. Unlimited government. Dictatorship. This is where those who rule cannot be held responsible to the will of the people. Dictatorships are probably the oldest and most common form of government known to history. There are two different types of dictatorships. You have an autocracy versus an oligarchy. Autocracy is a government in which a single person holds unlimited power. The easy way for me to remember what an autocracy is, if you use the root word auto, think of like the word autobiography. It's a book that is written by me, about me, the singular person. So if you think of a singular person writing an autobiography, think of a government like a democracy. It makes me think of government. One person is the government. Okay. Then oligarchy. So we're just kind of process of elimination on that sort of thing. I don't have any tricks on that. It's just knowing that this one's one, this is a few. So oligarchy, a government in which the power to rule is held by a small, usually self-appointed elite. So where I guess maybe people get kind of tripped up and it's like, well, what's the difference between a representative government versus an oligarchy? Representative governments or representative democracies are a group of people that are put in place by the governed. We do those elections. Whereas an oligarchy, it would be a group of people that step up without any kind of formal election and they say, hey, look, we're the people in charge. Too bad, so sad, you can't do anything about it. So that's essentially what an oligarchy is. Now, all dictatorships are authoritarian. I like our vocabulary on this one. Authoritarian. Those in power hold the absolute and unchallengeable authority over people. So all dictatorships are authoritarian. Now, more extreme versions of dictatorships, which they can be both autocracies or an oligarchy, being totalitarian. So like I said, some really fun vocabulary. So if we take the root word on here, just remember Totalitarian, we see the word total. Think of total control. So it exercises complete power over nearly every aspect of human affairs. So if you think about the governments that do not allow people to express their own desires, individual opinions, if they do that, they could be put in prison. Think of some of the stronger governments that have more control over the citizen and what they can say, what they can do, express outwardly into society. Because if it's something that goes against the government or is too radical or, heaven forbid, even be provoking, that could cause them to get in trouble. Now, dictatorial regimes are militaristic in nature, so that's kind of how they keep their control, and it's gaining that power by force. Other forms of limited government is a theocracy and a absolute monarchy. So a theocracy is a government of a state by immediate divine guidance or by officials who are regarded as divinely guided. So theocracy, so thinking about if there's a person that is either A, they are the head of the church, or B, there's a king and somebody that is the head of a church, such as they're papal, or they are a cardinal or a lead bishop or something of that high-ranking official of the official country's religion, and those two people as an oligarchy are ruling together, or the king makes decisions but has to get, I guess, a secondary approval from the head of the church in order to get laws approved. That could be, I guess, examples of a theocracy. Whereas a absolute monarchy is a monarchy that is not limited or restrained by the laws of a constitution. So someone that refers to themselves as a king or an emperor, something of that similar sort, these are an example of an autocracy, where they are a singular person that is in control of everything, and they do not have to bend to the will of the people. Most likely they are not elected. It could be hereditary, such as, or like an empire, such as that it's passed down from, a king to a prince and the prince's subsequent children and that sort of thing. It has to go through a bloodline. So I do recommend looking at some examples of theocracies and examples of monarchies as well. So our learning target that we were to accomplish by going through this lesson is to compare the essential and limited, the characteristics of limited and unlimited governments, and comparing the historic and contemporary examples of unlimited governments to examples of limited governments. What we're going to take a look at moving forward in our next learning target is comparing the advantages and disadvantages of the ways government power is distributed, shared, structured in unitary, federal, and confederal systems in the terms of effectiveness, prevention of abuse of power, and responsiveness to popular will.